Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903.
As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor, and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Hi, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and moments before this broadcast, I heard from my good friend Mike Lindell that guess what? He has been canceled yet again from another big box store. Which one is it this time? Walmart. You heard that right. They're canceling him everywhere just because of his Christian beliefs and his political beliefs. And so you can go out and support Mike Lindell and show him that cancel culture doesn't really work for conservatives. Use promo code Jenna for all MyPillow products. And right now, the classic MyPillow is $19.88 when you go and use promo code Jenna to support our good friend Mike Lindell. And let's show Walmart. They may try to cancel him out of the stores, but we love and appreciate Mike Lindell, and so we definitely want to support him. Okay, so the topic today, I'm actually really excited to talk about because I get so many questions and there are always so many tweets and banter back and forth about separation of church and state. And this really comes down to a question of what should a Christian's engagement in culture be? We've seen from the left that often they say, well, Christians shouldn't be involved in politics at all. And, keep your faith to yourself and you can't proselytize me. Go out and, maybe you can vote, but you shouldn't be a quote unquote Christian nationalist, like what they're blaming Doug Mastriano for being and saying, we just want a theocracy. But at the same time, churches often are also accepting that message. And they're saying, we don't want to talk about politics because this is just about faith, and what we do in the four walls of the church shouldn't have anything to do with politics. So how are Christians today supposed to be active and engaged in their culture? And is separation of church and state even a thing? Well, joining me now to discuss this is John Root, who's a contributor to TPUSA, one of my good friends, and definitely takes some of the best, most wonky pictures on social media. So, John, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me, Jenna. I definitely do not take serious photos too often.
Yeah. And before we get to this really important topic, I have to ask you the most obvious question, speaking about pictures. Were you even asked by Warner Brothers to be Ken in the new upcoming Barbie movie before they just gave that to Ryan Gosling?
Yeah, I mean, I understand Ryan Gosling being the number one choice, but I would imagine that I was the backup because it was funny because at YWS just about a couple years ago now, they had a very big Barbie theme and they had this Barbie box, and then I jumped in and it was all of a sudden just like, that's Ken. There he is. I get that all the time.
Yeah, I remember that. I was there actually with the Barbie boxes, and that would have been perfect. So everyone should go and follow John's Instagram. So at Johnny Root. on Instagram, because I'm sure that you have some of those pictures of the Barbie boxes. That's hilarious.
No doubt.
Yeah. Well, I think you would have made a much better Ken than Ryan Gosling, because Christians, should be engaged in culture, even if it's as ridiculous as a Barbie movie. But anyway, so let's actually get to the topic here, though. So, so you are a contributor with Turning Point USA, host TP USA Live, which I've had the privilege of being on. And so, you are right in ground zero with TP USA of engaging a lot of young conservatives, many of whom are Christians, who really want to change the culture and they want to change the landscape of politics. So, from a biblical perspective, how do we need to address this issue?
Well, how do you create change? You need our creator involved in that process, because there's so many people that try to say, like, all right, put God on the sidelines in this specific situation because someone deems it as political. But in every sense of the word, it's societal or a cultural issue or a new theology that's thrown out there, or ideology, or basically a new cult. We're seeing that, especially right now in Pride Month. Like, everybody's been radicalized. And if you're going to try to tell us that we don't need our creator involved in these processes, I mean, I think you're missing the point. And then a lot of times too, we start making idols, whether you're on the right or the left, you're making idols out of politics and politicians. And we need to get down to the foundation. What is this built upon? What is the values that are instilled in this new policy or this ideology or whatever we're talking about, whatever discussion that gets people riled up these days? What's the baseline? And I think we need to go to the Bible for that. And too often people are trying to go to these big books or someone of prominence on social media. And that's just trying to rely on our humanness when we should be going to something that's divine and more powerful than any single one of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there was a Gallup poll that came out recently that said that over 50% of Americans would rate the United States moral values as poor, on a scale of poor, of course, being the worst. And I find this so interesting because in order to even rank that and even have a position on how you would rank the moral view of Americans, you have to compare that to an objective standard. And so when we're telling our young people in culture that everyone should be living my truth versus your truth, and everyone is free to have whatever morality they want, yet we should see then that American society would be rated at 100%, the greatest moral society ever, because everyone is simply living out their own truth. But we see that there's a conflict there, John, because people understand that truth is objective and that morality is objective. And in order to have a workable society, we all have to agree on the definition of moral truth and have a measurable difference between right and wrong and good and evil. So where does that come from? Our collective judgment and what we just decide to impose on society that can change at a whim? Or is it something that comes from outside man and is imposed upon the reality to which we're presented?
I think C.S. Lewis did an incredible job breaking this down in Mere Christianity. It's definitely a tough read, and I'm one of those people that I have to reread a page probably about 5 times before it's really instilled in my mind and my heart. But this is something that's divine. This is something that we don't just create as humans. Like, what created the downfall in every single civilization? Them deciding what truth is, them deciding what morality is, them deciding how they should be going about the way they live their lives. And I've said this for a very, very long time. I remember I tweeted it out like over half a decade ago when I was living in the Bay Area, and that's a very unchurched area. That was definitely a tough time in my life, but I think it was a blessing to be there, because when you're thrown kind of into lion's den, you have to be prepared in your faith and have these morality conversations, these conversations about, hey, truth is actually objective. It's not subjective. And I remember saying my truth is one of the most dangerous things that's happened to our society, because there's a major difference between your truth and your experience. Because especially right now too, when you bring up police brutality, racism, sex and gender, people can have their own experiences, but to paint with this broad brush that this is the way our society and our culture is, I think people are really missing the point. And I think if we keep going down this road that we're focusing on people's truth instead of the truth, we're going to fall just like any other civilization.
So how, John, do we how do we explain to people and have them understand that experience does matter in terms of our perception of reality, but we have to compare our emotions and our experience to an objective standard? I mean, my mom always likes to say, and she's a biblical counselor, that our feelings only evidence what we think about something, and we have to compare that to the truth and then align ourselves with the truth, and then our emotions will follow.
Because obviously, in this day and age, and I think probably for all of time, you can't just beat people down with facts. You can't beat them down with logic, even though, I mean, we've all been in relationships, and there's times where guys are like, well, I feel like I'm being pretty logical. And then you never want to tell a woman that they're being emotional. But there has to be coming together of just like, all right, I can empathize with the emotion here, I can empathize with the experience. Here's the truth, and here's how we move forward. Like, what's the solution here? Do you want to just feel for the sense of feeling? And I think oftentimes people just want to be accepted. They just want to be heard. They want to feel valued, that it turns into this whole tribalistic thing, especially when you bring up the feminists. They're starting to eat themselves. They're like, well, I want to believe all women, but I just saw the Amber Heard case, and that doesn't seem to be the facts. I mean, can we just get down to the truth instead of being, oh, are you on the woman's side? Or are you on the man's side? Are you on the Christian side? Or are you on the atheist side? It needs to just get down to the truth. And I think too often people have to pick sides when it's not as black and white as people make it out to be. But black and white sells, and that's what you're seeing right now, especially with BLM. They've had so much prominence over the last few years, especially. And it's like, you're either with us or you're against us. If you post a black square, you believe that racism is wrong and that we're going to do whatever we can to stop it. And if you don't post it, you are obviously racist yourself. You're showing some sort of privilege. It's not as black and white as people make it out to be.
Yeah, and we should object to the underlying premise that emotions have to be validated all the time and that people's experiences have to be validated for what they perceive. And this goes back to the Christian worldview of understanding that we have to have an objective set of principles that govern us. And that is true for relationships, it's true for the family, it's true for the church, and it's also true for civil society. And that's why understanding that, and going back to our initial question about the separation of church and state, it doesn't mean that we separate principles of objective truth and principles of morality from the state and allow the state to just operate in this sort of nihilistic view that just says that, we can arbitrate our own reality, and whatever we all happen to feel at any given time needs to be validated in civil society because we may not each individually choose to be part of a local church. We still have to have standards, and we still have to have objective standards of morality. I mean, even looking at BLM or some of these riots and things, when we look at that and we say, oh, well, they're just, they need to be validated as their truth because they feel a certain way, then that's undermining the legitimacy of law enforcement, of the justice system, of the rule of law, of all of these principles that are the foundation of any civil society, but certainly the foundation of America, that we were built on the recognition of self-evident truth that our rights come from God, our creator, not our government. So the sole purpose of government is to preserve and protect those rights. That's what makes us a Christian nation. Not that we have a separation between the principles of Christianity and civil society. So separation of church and state is all about recognizing that there are three spheres of government: the church, the civil society, and the family, and that they operate differently. And so when we're looking at engaging the culture as Christians, how effective do you think that we need to be, John, as Christians in civil society to reclaim an understanding of the truth and moral principles rather than just my truth versus your truth?
Well, I think it starts with church leaders 100%. And I think a lot of church leaders let us down, especially during the pandemic. I mean, rightfully so. A lot of us were trying to figure out what was going on, and we want to take care of our neighbor and love our neighbor. But we started to listen to government, and these leaders started to listen to government to tell them if and when they could worship, what they could tell their congregation, what is actually safe, and really put God on the sideline. And that's really what the left and a lot of people of the world want us to do. They're going to tell both you and I, Jenna, that, you know what, this seems to be more of a political discussion. So don't talk about abortion in the church because that's political. Don't talk about Pride Month because that's political. And in all honesty, when it comes to the separation of church and state, it was to keep government out of the church, not God out of government. And if we don't have God in government, which our country was founded upon and influenced by Judeo-Christian values, and every single society that has denied God, that has shunned God and told God that they don't need him has fallen. And I think that's what we're seeing right now is an absolute onslaught. I mean, people don't even know what a woman is anymore. And I know that's been taking the world by storm right now. I think Matt Walsh did an incredible job. That documentary is fantastic. But it comes down to, he asks the simple question, obviously, of what is a woman? But inside of that, it's like, what is truth? And the truth will set you free. And the truth and light and the way is Jesus Christ. And if we start steering away from that, like we have in our schools, in every aspect of society, we're going to keep going downhill. But I think we have to fight for it. And you got to be unashamed and unafraid. And I don't have it all together. I know you definitely will tell your followers and your listeners that you don't have it all together. We're constantly learning and evolving and understanding God. But I feel like we understand at least this baseline and this foundation, and we can build from there.
Absolutely. And you're so right, John, that it starts with the churches and not being hesitant as church leaders and also as individual members like you and I of the church to not be hesitant and to talk about all of these things and to not allow the leftists to say, well, that's too political. So as a Christian, you shouldn't be imposing your morality on me. Well, then the question becomes, well, whose morality should we be imposing? Yours, mine? I mean, everyone wants to just live their truth, but how would that be practical in society? Because even if we take that premise and we flesh that out to its logical conclusion, if I'm allowed to live my truth as much as a secular leftist is allowed to live theirs, then me sharing my faith and saying it's part of my faith that everyone needs to recognize that abortion should be illegal, that's actually living my truth. So it's a self-defeating statement for them to claim that everyone should be able to live their truth, because Christianity is by definition an exclusive set of principles, because truth necessarily excludes non-truth. But when you try to say that everything simultaneously is true, then that's inherently incompatible and it's illogical, because you can't have two mutually inconsistent things be true at the same time. And so for leftists, though, they can't wrap their head around the fact that in order for civil society to function at all, we have to have a set of principles and a moral standard that we all agree with. And so the question then for them is, if not, the principles that our founders declared and recognized are self-evident truth that comes from God, then what better standard are you suggesting? And I don't think they really have a good answer to that.
No, they don't. And it's not Jenna's morality. It's not John's morality. It's not the founding fathers' morality. It's morality of God. Like, he established that. He's the creator of the earth. He's the creator of morality. And if we're going to start getting into that, like, I'm never going to tell anybody on your show or on social media anywhere that, this is my morality. No, like, I'm going to try to explain the best I can what God said. And that's just like, that's why I feel like we have to understand scripture. We have to understand the word. We have to get into the context. We can't eisegesis the Bible and say, well, I read this and it sounds like this in my worldview or my own context. Like, what does it actually say based on when it was written and during that time? And I think if we stick to that we have inalienable rights in this country. And that's when you get to the next part, endowed by our creator. So knowing that there is a divine power outside of you and I and everybody else in this country that has instilled morality into us. There's the 10 Commandments. There's the Word of God. There's the way the Christian church was built in Acts. We have that built there for us. But a lot of people just want it given to them tell me what morality is, tell me what logic is, tell me what wisdom is, tell me what discernment is, and they're not even getting to the Word of God, and they have zero relationship with Christ. And I think we can both attest to this. When you actually build that relationship, and Christianity is not just a set of rules, we start to understand God's heart a lot more, and we can engage in these conversations and these discussions and get down to a truth here that I feel like everybody just has to find. We can, once again, we can keep hitting people with logic. We can keep hitting people with the right passages and verses and the right theology and point them to the right commentaries, but they actually have to do the work themselves and really understand morality comes from God. It doesn't come from humans.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating too is that it's the Christian life that is actually the most joyful. And when we get to know and understand the person of God and his character, and God is the personification of truth. And so when we are truth seeking and we are trying to find the truth, what that actually means is that we are trying to get to know the person of God. And he has ordained everything in this universe for our benefit. So when we understand who he is and we live according to his will and according to what he says is best for us, because it's not my morality, it's not your morality, it's not what we all collectively guess is maybe the best morality or what we want to be our experiences. But when we know the heart of our Creator, isn't it our Creator who would know what's best for us and what is best for how we should live our lives and how we should operate within these institutions that he's created? And so when we look at how the Christian life is so joyful, it doesn't mean that it's without trials, that it's without difficulties or stress, or, it's not the prosperity gospel that, add Christ to your life and suddenly you'll be this perfect person. It doesn't work like that. It means that you understand the purpose of man. You understand who we are as made as human beings in the image of God. You understand the person of God and also where we're going, where we'll spend eternity. And when we have this whole concept of the scope of history and where we are in the whole trajectory of that grand narrative, then we start to understand why we're doing things and what our purpose is. And that actually then begins to make sense and it fulfills us. And so we have more joy and our emotions are actually in line with what everyone wants, which is joy and happiness when we start to understand the heart of our Creator. I think that's so well expressed, John. And, as we look at, all of these leftists who they want so desperately to be happy. And that's what Pride Month is all about. Go and live your truth and who you think you want to be. But these people are actually miserable.
Yeah. Well, the joy of the Lord is our strength. And I feel like when people see so many attacks on us, on Christians, they expect us to either cower or lash back out. And obviously, sometimes people can say things about us or our families or our loved ones, and we want to get angry, we want to lash out. But the greatest way you can fight it is by smiling back, where it's like, no weapon forged against me can take me down. No way. You can try to punch me, you can hit me in the gut all you want, but I got God by my side. And too often people see the Christian life as, oh man, like I can't do this anymore. I can't do that anymore. And this used to be so fun. And I guarantee you, every single person that has a real relationship with Christ, they will tell you, just like you said, Jenna, I'm going through tough times. And things hurt, but for some reason, I feel like I have value, purpose, and fulfillment even during these dark days. And that's what broke my heart the most during the pandemic is there's so many people that were scared to die that they're forgetting how to live. We have to remember that we're in the world, but we're not of the world. And here we are guaranteed to be persecuted more than anybody else on earth because we follow Christ. But at the same time, we're building towards something that's eternal. Like this is just a blip in the radar here on this earth. We have to be good stewards of the earth in our relationships, but here we have to show grace, joy, and true love. When you talk about Pride Month, there's this whole idea of like love is love. No, it's not. Like Christ is love. And just because I don't accept your lifestyle doesn't mean that I'm not going to show love to you. Like a lot of people try to say that Christians are so hateful during this month, especially. I mean, there's been an onslaught with a lot of us and what we're going to post on the opposite end of things. Like at the same time, I'm going to say, well, people that are heterosexual, that doesn't mean that you can go sleep with someone before you get married and feel like you have some righteous step up from other people. It's not the way it works at all. But I think as Christians, I mean, I love my life. At times, I can thank God that I'm being persecuted in His name, and but at the same time, too, it's like I don't even think we really understand what persecution really means in Western society. Like we can receive some harsh comments and people can say mean things to us most of the time, not in person. They can hide behind their keyboards, but there's people all across the world that are losing their lives just because they want to meet together and talk about Jesus. We really aren't going through too much, but I think we need to smile through it all.
We do. And we need to remember why it is that we're engaging in politics and culture. It's not just so that we can be happy and be successful and go live our best lives. I mean, getting back to this concept of, separation of church and state and this myth that really the church has bought into that, oh, we can't touch, these other topics because they're too political, they're too divisive, we might offend people. We have to remember why it is that we are engaging these topics and we are supposed to as Christians, because every policy view has an implicit moral component and it has a perspective and an operating principle. And so we need to be approaching these topics, yes, with love and compassion, because there are, for example, so many women who have had abortions who seriously regret that and they're going through so
Mhm.
much, and we as a church need to come alongside them and be loving and say there is forgiveness and hope and grace and mercy found in the truth in the name of Jesus Christ. And that doesn't mean we're going to affirm what you did. It means that we're going to give you hope that God forgives everything. And we need to, as I've always said, make abortion not just illegal, but unthinkable, so that
Mhm.
these women don't have to feel like that's their only way out and that's their only option. So, yes, we need to be loving, but part of being loving is being truthful. And so, as Christians engage politics and policy, one of the things that I've seen from a lot of conservatives is that they're kind of missing this component of truth, because they see, okay, capitalism is the best, and here's my economic policy, and here's but then on the social issues, we don't really want to touch that, and we're okay with the MAGA drag queen and some of these things, and they're sort of piecemealing this worldview together that doesn't really actually make sense, and it's not inherently consistent. And so, how can we encourage young people to say we're involved and we're engaging the culture and we're engaging politics without a separation of church and state, how the leftists would want us to view that, by saying, of course, we have to engage as the church and we have to make sure that we're operating on biblically sound principles, objective standards, and fundamental truthful principles.
Yeah, if people are getting more upset about how people attack their favorite politicians or their side of the aisle and not upset when they attack God, you need to have a rewiring. Like you need to have a transformation of your mind. Like don't be conformed to this world. And that goes for the right and the left. And I tell people often, conservatism does not equal, it does not equal Christianity at all. And I think when people start diving into a lot of these political discussions or whatever people deem to be political, they lose the fact that these are once again cultural and societal issues. And these things are covered in the Word of God. And if you are going to a church and you have that draft opinion piece that just got leaked, and your pastor is not talking about abortion within that week or those couple weeks, what are you doing? Because we have to be prepared as Christians and mobilize as the church to have these kind of discussions and have discussions with people that have gone through that, people that have had abortions, people that almost were aborted themselves. I know that's what my pastor at Pella Communities Church out here in Glendale, Arizona, ended up talking about. He said, this is how our church stands here. We are adamantly pro-life.
If you have gone through an abortion before, I would love to talk to you. If you are on the pro-choice side, I am going to be outside the doors right after church. I will be honest, I don't really understand your view as a Christian, but let's have a conversation. And I think those kind of things need to happen. But oftentimes, Christian leaders and people inside of that church establishment are not even having these conversations because they're afraid to be called hateful. They're afraid to be called a bigot. They're afraid, plain and simple, to stand for what God has established in his church and in his word.
Yeah, and I think they really need to reconsider what is the role of the church in society, because if it's just this whole sort of evangelical mega church, let's have like the Jesus TED Talk, and Jesus is your life coach, and this is how to go live your best life, then we're forgetting the truth of what the gospel is and what the Great Commission is and how to win hearts and minds for the Lord, and that includes every aspect of culture, and it includes engaging people where they're at. And so we need to make sure that as young people, and as training up the next generation, that they're not separating politics and policy from the church, that they're actually seeing that it has to be cohesive, and that politics, policy, what the church does, what the family does, every aspect of human life and humanity itself, the definition of what it means not only to be a woman, but what it means to just be a human being, is founded and foundationally in the truth of the biblical worldview. And I love that you mentioned C.S. Lewis earlier in Mere Christianity. That's one of my favorite books. And I go back and read it all the time, at least once a year, because it's just so rich in how he expresses why he's a Christian. Because C.S. Lewis says, I don't believe in God like some fairy tale or something that he's added. It's because the truth of the Bible and the Christian worldview is the best explanation for the reality to which I'm presented. And we all have to answer those questions. And so, as we all have to answer political questions, as we all have to answer what our role is in the church, the family, civil society, these institutions, remember that they were all created by God, and that by his authority, they run and have legitimacy because of him as the author and creator of the universe. And when we forget that, and we try to excise God from society, then we get to these totally absurd questions like, what is a woman? Or yesterday on my show, I was talking about a Daily Wire article that mentioned a New York court case about a group that wanted to allege that an elephant is a person because it has emotional capabilities and cognitive function. And I'm like, if we're to that point in society where we're having those kinds of debates, we've lost all sense of not just reason, but of reality. And so, as you talk to the students and the activists and the great people at Turning Point, how do you help them engage this and say politics and policy has to be based on Christian principles?
Well, unfortunately, so many kids have to grow up so fast now. I know when we were in high school and college, we didn't have to deal with these kind of conversations. I mean, there's always a faith conversation involved in our life, but now politics is in everything. And I'm talking to some high school students that are being called the worst of the worst. And they're getting ostracized from their communities, on campus, and on their sports teams, and in basically every aspect of life. And right now, people just can't be naive to these conversations or what's going on in the world. I think there was a little bit, maybe when we grew up, like ignorance is bliss. Um, but now there's a reason all of this politics is infused in our society, is because they took God out of school, they took God out of so many aspects of society, and they filled it in with this brand new ideology, this brand new religion within itself. And I think a lot of times governments become their daddy, and instead of looking to God the Father here. And a lot of these kids, I try to encourage them to engage in these conversations with grace and love. And what's going to piss off the other side, not that you're aiming to make people angry, but that you're going to be calm, cool, and collected. They're going to say all these names, you can't react to that because there's no truth to it. And obviously we've gotten used to those things, Jenna. Like online, people are going to call us terrible things, and then you keep hearing that and hearing that. You're just like, well, this doesn't even hurt anymore because it's just not true. But a lot of these kids, unfortunately, they're not able to just grow up and be a kid. They're expected to be their own political activists. But when there's the left side of the aisle that's really riled up a lot of these young kids, we need kids on the right and kids that are built on a rock and not on sand like the other side. And to be able to have these conversations, and it's okay to say, I don't know. I always tell kids that you don't have to get into a discussion or an argument and feel like you just have to win. Like, when's the last time you had one conversation with a family member, significant other, anybody, and felt like, yes, I got everything done in that one conversation? That's not the way it works. Also, I think there's a lot of people that feel like they need to be the savior themselves. Like, no, equip yourself. Prepare yourself with the word of God. Be prayerful about these discussions and these situations you're going to get thrown into, but allow God to work himself. Because if we start having this savior complex, we're going to lose the whole idea of what it means to actually interact in a civil society and find a way forward. Because hopefully that one discussion leads to another discussion that leads to more discussions within their own little community. And then hopefully we get a trickle-down effect from leadership in schools, leadership in government, leadership in churches that are instilling how to have these conversations through a biblical lens.
Yeah, and I so agree with that, and that we need to be equipping ourselves and also our young people and our kids to be able to know the truth and to have that knowledge, not just faith as this, well, I believe in God, but with no real explanation, because the Bible also talks about being able to give an answer for the hope that lies within you. And so you're right, we don't have to have an answer to absolutely every question, but we do need to be able to explain with knowledge of who God is, why we're Christians and why we are more than just influencers. I mean, so many young people today, they just want the Instagram following. They just want to, be on TV or whatever it is, and without really the substance. And the substance is the true heart of it. And instead of just looking to be an influencer, look at being an ambassador for Christ and to make his name famous and to say, this is the truth. It is his truth. And that's the only thing that matters. And if we continue to grow in the grace and the knowledge of the Lord, then we'll continue to have better answers. We'll be able to explain, and we'll be able to do more than just say, well, I'm involved in one aspect of politics and policy. We'll truly be able to be the church for society. So, John, thanks so much for this conversation today. And I hope that a lot of people listening are really encouraged and can see that, this isn't about separating the church from the state. This is all about saying government shouldn't run the church. The government shouldn't be telling the church what it teaches or compelling it to speak against the Bible, but that the church absolutely needs to be engaged in civil society. Christians need to be debating policy, need to be engaged and active citizens. And so where can people find you and also get involved with Turning Point? Such a great organization. My friends Charlie and Erica Kirk are just the best. So really appreciate the work that you all do there.
Yeah, you can find Turning Point USA on every single social media platform. You can't find me on every single social media platform. I'm off Twitter still. Got off Twitter because I said that the Woman of the Year is a man, Rachel Levin, and the best female swimmer is a man, and that was Leah Thomas. So not going to find a lot from me on Twitter right now, but I'm on Instagram and I'm on Getter at JohnnyRoot_. And please get involved with Turning Point USA. I mean, especially if you're a Gen Zer or if you're not. I mean, we have incredible events. Jenna, you've been to a lot of those, and I know a lot of people probably listening have either seen Turning Point USA on social media or they've been to those events. And I feel like you just feel fired up for America. You feel more patriotic. And a lot of times, too, you're going to hear people of prominence in the media space and political space and every aspect of culture talk about their relationship with Christ. Everybody's on their own specific journey. And I know America Fest last year, it was so encouraging to hear so many people bring glory to Christ when easily they could have been been bringing glory to themselves while they got 10,000 people inside the Phoenix Convention Center staring at them and thousands of other people watching them online. It's been a great organization. Very, very blessed to be there and very thankful you had me on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I love Turning Point events. I'm always so grateful to come out and join you. And, likewise, I'm so proud to be an American because we were the first nation that was founded on the truth and the recognition that our rights come from God, our creator. We mandated that our government is required to be under the authority of God, our creator, and preserve and protect our rights. And that's something that is worth fighting for as Christians, and also teaching, not just fighting in a combative way, but actually teaching and encouraging everyone else to understand that America is literally the greatest nation on the face of the earth because we're founded on the truth and the Judeo-Christian worldview. So thanks, John, for joining me. Looking forward to having you on again soon. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Jenna.
Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. I also want to talk about another great American who is the sponsor of this podcast, and that, of course, is my good friend Mike Lindell. He has been canceled out of so many box stores for simply standing up for his own political opinion. And disagree or not, or support him or not, it is a fundamental right of every American to be able to voice their opinion, and that absolutely includes politics. That absolutely includes issues that are central to our culture. That includes faith. Mike is such a very sincere Christian, and I am proud to consider him a friend, and he is, of course, a friend of this show. So right now, there is a special on MyPillow.com. Click on the new radio listener specials. Get deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including a great towel set, which is a 6-piece set. It includes 2 bath, 2 hand towels, 2 washcloths, made in the USA, regularly $109.99, now just $39.99, but you have to use the promo code Jenna. That's Jenna. That tells Mike that you listen to this show, you're happy that he is a sponsor of this show, and you will get great discounts, but use the promo code Jenna. That's Jenna, either at mypillow.com or call 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna.